Hi, this is Nolan from Benchmark, and in today's video, I'm going to explain how your receiver actually works so that you can get better results and data in the field. So in this video, we're going to talk about the different components that make up your receiver and the information that the satellite signals are actually sending to your receiver that allows it to process its position. So this is part 2 of our 4-part series looking into the foundational learning components of GNSS equipment. So what we're going to look at first is a very simple breakdown of what a GPS or GNSS receiver is doing. So what I've got here is a receiver that we have somewhat disassembled and our data collector. And we're going to talk about going from a satellite signal to a northern easting mapping position on our data collector. So what's going to happen is you're going to get satellite signals that are flying in, these radio signals. They're just going to strike the antenna, and the antenna converts those signals into electrical impulses that it then sends to the GNSS board. So there's not really anything smart happening on these antennas. They're just really good at collecting information and turning them into electrical signals. Those electrical signals are then passed through to the board of your GNSS receiver. And this is where the actual magic happens with a GPS receiver. It takes the information from our antenna and converts it into usable data that we can use in the field. So that includes things like your northing and easting and the time constant, all of the information that the satellite is throwing out. And it does that by taking all of the available electrical impulses from all the satellites that the antenna is seeing, comparing them, and then using that trilateration like we talked about in the last video to calculate out its position. Now, there's a bit of a misconception sometimes that these antennas are calculating your northing easting. They're not. That is your data collector. So all these give you is a latitude and longitude when we're talking about mapping. A latitude, longitude, and elevation, which it then passes on to whatever communication device, whether it's a serial cable or Bluetooth or just straight piped into a computer, whatever it is, that information is then piped into the receiver, which then transfers it to whatever collection device you're using. Now, in our case, we're using an Archer 4 and a S631, so we end up with an NMEA string over Bluetooth into the data collector, which then takes the latitude and longitude position that is generated by the receiver and recalculates it into a northing easting position with a mathematical constant. So we've got a pretty good overview of what the satellites are sending our receiver. So what I've done here is I've laid out these kind of islets as our satellites, and we've got our receiver, because what we need to start looking at to understand how our position is calculated is the physical constraints that we've got to deal with on the ground. So our receiver has what's called a mask angle. That mask angle is the amount of sky that it's looking at. And what we want ideally is that all of our satellites are distributed across the entire length of the sky, because this makes it easier to solve our trilateration problems. That problem where we've got, okay, where does our satellites intersect? Because that will allow us to calculate our position. Now, the more distributed these are, the easier it is to solve this equation, and the more redundancy we have in that equation in order to have better confidence in our position. But what happens if all of our satellites are clustered over one half of the sky? What happens when they're all over here? Well, that is going to dilute what is called our dilution of precision, or our DOP value. And the higher that value is, the worse the geometry of our satellites. When they're all clustered over here, we now have a large amount of uncertainty in this section of the sky. We're not sure if there's any information over here that we can use that will allow us to solve that trilateration problem, and that increases the uncertainty on our position. Now, modern receivers are pretty good at figuring this out and dealing with even a highly restricted portion of the sky, but as we get more and more clustered and more of the sky gets cut out, this becomes harder and harder to solve, and even the most modern and most advanced receivers are not going to be able to solve this problem. This is why when you go into something like an alley, or if you're downtown navigating with your phone and you have a hard time getting a good position and it's firing you wildly all over the place and sending you up and down each block, it's because it can't see many satellites, and the satellites that it can see are all clustered in one portion of the sky, making it really hard to solve our problem. So what we're going to do now is look at the next portion of this, and that's multipath, because when you start constricting parts of the sky, that means satellite signals aren't reaching your receiver cleanly, and that's going to have big effects for your position. So what this looks like when we're trying to solve our trilateration problem is this. In an ideal world, when they're all spread out, we're going to get nice overlaps that it's going to give us a nice intersection point. So if you've got our satellites, you can imagine our receivers down here. But what happens if they're all clustered to one side? So they're all kind of like this. What happens is, even though these satellites are like this. So instead of being nicely distributed where we'd have some out here, they're all clustered on one half of the sky. Our position is now quite a bit more uncertain. Instead of having a nice precise position, we have a large position that this could be, where that trilateration equation indicates, meaning that we have a lot more uncertainty in our position, leading to a reduction in precision and accuracy. So we've looked at how your receiver is put together and the components that make it up. But what we really need to understand is that the signals that your receiver is dealing with is coming from thousands and thousands of kilometers away. So by the time it reaches you, it is really, really weak. And furthermore, those signals are coming from all over the place, and they might be reflecting off things or coming from different angles, heights, and elevations, being refracted by the atmosphere. And by the time they get to your receiver, they're really, really garbled. So your receiver has to take that information, decode it, break it down, and then figure out if it's truly valid or not. And there are a number of different things that help with that, including the fact that there are multiple constellations in the sky. So what we've got to remember is, and I talked briefly about it in our last video, is that there's 4 global constellations: GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and Beidou. They're run by 4 different governments: the Americans, the Russians, the Europeans, and the Chinese, and all of them use different signal structures. And the advantage of that is it helps your receiver decode that information in different environments. So some of them are built for better under canopy, like the more powerful L5 signals, but some of them are simpler, like the ones that you get on your phone. They don't need to be as advanced necessarily. So a lot of phones will use your L1 and L2, which are older signals, but work great for basic mapping applications. Now, we've talked about in some of our other videos on our YouTube channel, receivers are of different qualities. They have different components in them that will affect the performance greatly. What we want in order to achieve a centimeter level position is a couple of different things. We want a high grade antenna, a high grade board, and we need the ability to receive signals across all constellations and all frequencies. So what does that actually mean for you in the field? So the reason you want those high-end components if you're doing mapping is a couple of different reasons. For starters is you're going to want to be able to take the best information possible and use it to compute your solution, because you're solving for 4 unknowns, as I mentioned in our last video. You're solving for your X, your Y, your Z, and then a timing component. And by having a high-grade antenna, we can maximize those signals, because again, remember, we're coming from thousands of kilometers away to reach down to us here on the Earth, and we need a high-grade antenna and a high-grade board that can A, amplify those signals, and then B, process and decode them properly to determine how far away each satellite is. And by doing that, we're going to calculate our position. Now, for our receiver, this is done by calculating the pseudo range to our receiver. Now, I'm not going to get into the exact mathematics behind it, but to very simply explain what it is and how it works is each satellite signal contains information on the time, the exact time that that satellite sent out that broadcast information. And your receiver can then use that and compare it to other satellites in the area to decode the true GPS time. And by comparing that to the time broadcast by the satellite, we can figure out the time difference between the broadcast and the reception by using the fact that that radio signal is traveling at the speed of light. By calculating that time and that distance between you and the receiver, you can start solving that trilateration equation and computing your raw GPS position. Now, in this video, we've talked about the different components that make up your receiver and a little bit about the signals that your receiver is processing. But what you need to understand is that your receiver is taking the information the satellites are broadcasting and it's decoding that information. So when you put your receiver into an area that has maybe high multipath, so you've got a lot of things like trees and buildings nearby, the information that your receiver is going to receive is not going to be as good. It's going to be harder for that receiver to figure out what's a good and what's a bad signal. Imagine if you're in a cave system and you hear somebody shouting and there's echoes coming all from all directions and you can't really figure out where they're coming from. That's kind of what your receiver is going to be contending with in a high multipath environment. And why that's important for you in the field is that is probably why some of you who've tried taking an older receiver that doesn't have access to as many signals or constellations into the deep woods or into a mine pit, you've probably struggled to get a good position. So in order to get the best results in the field with GPS, you're going to want a receiver that again can receive all constellations and all signal types. And then 2, that you're in a position to actually succeed with GPS. Taking it under a bridge or taking it inside of a building is never going to work, because even if you can get signals in those areas, they're not going to be very good. And that's because they're going to be reflected off things, they're going going to be changed, they're going to be very weak, or you're not going to have access to quite a lot of them, so you're not going to have a lot of redundancy in your equation, giving you bad results in the field. So what we're going to do in the next video is talk about what the actual setups are you can use GPS for, what the different types of setups are, and how you can actually use those in the field to do the kind of work that you will be doing every day. Now, watch this next video and subscribe to Benchmark for surveying made simple, and you can learn more about this stuff on survey-assistant.com.